Yeah, so I'm Simon, he's Dan. Usually the first question we get is it Picus or Picus, and we say Picus, but you can say what you like. Yeah, and the next question usually is what is breach and attack simulation, or what is it we do? So the whole idea behind what we do is we want to validate your security controls are working as you expect them to, and then we want to highlight the gaps where those security controls are, and hopefully provide you with some remediation. I come from the SOC and SIM space, so I spent, instead of doing the cool stuff in hoodies, hacking stuff, I spent like my time wearing glasses and looking at log files and stuff, trying to get data into a SIM. So I come at it from that sort of side of the house, and there's some things in the Picus platform which I think sort of really help with what Tal was saying about the foundations, because she's absolutely right. The bit that's going to bite you in the backside is the foundational pieces that you've forgotten. You've been distracted by ML or UBA or whatever the latest widget is, and all of a sudden someone spun up 5 servers, they put them in your data center, they're not logging into your SIM, so you've got no visibility, and so you've got a massive blind spot in your environment. So that's kind of sort of my view at it. And so this is what we're trying to, these are the types of problems we're trying to address with Picus. We've got a few products in the technology stack, but the thing we're going to look at today is our security control validation platform, which Gartner would call breach and attack simulation. So this is where we're trying to emulate and simulate real-world malicious behavior in our environment to see how the controls stand up. So I'm going to do like a short 90-minute demo just before lunch, and then Dan's going to finish off with another 2-hour lecture. So I'm sure it will fly by, no worries. So this is the Picus dashboard, and this is what you see when you first log into the security control validation platform. So we break everything down into prevention and detection scores. So we want to know how well we're stopping stuff and how well we're seeing stuff effectively. And what we can say about this environment is we're currently preventing 48% of the attacks that are being simulated, and we're detecting 66% of them. So not bad, but not great. We deliver everything like this in a 0 to 100% score, so it's really easy to communicate to non-technical people, or just communicate around to other people. Actually makes it very easy. And we color coordinate it as well in case percentages are confusing for some people. Although if you get confused by percentages and you're colorblind, I guess we're pretty stuck. Okay, so we've got some work to do, and that's kind of a high-level snapshot of how we're doing right now. One of the things I like about breach and attack simulation, and I think all of the tools, including Gitpol and services like eCentire and everything, is really we want to add more context and data into conversations. We don't want people to be reacting or knee-jerk reacting to things, because you make bad decisions. People are bad at making decisions under pressure. And so as we sort of move through the dashboard and through the demo I'm going to go through, hopefully you'll sort of see how we're sort of layering in that context. So the first part is our security score graph. This is how well we've been doing over time. Now this is our demo environment, which is non-operational, which is why that graph looks almost perfectly flat. What tends to happen when you use a product like Picus is that where you start to mitigate your environment based on the advice you get from the platform, your environment evolves as our platform evolves with the threat landscape. So it's a kind of a knock-on effect. So what we tend to see is that graph trending upwards or staying somewhere near the top. However, you will get these little notches in the graph every now and again. That tends to be because we're either simulating a new threat that's maybe a 0-day or something like that, a new thing that your controls haven't seen before, or it could be a policy configuration error. So we were talking quite a lot about Active Directory, and I'm pretty old school these days, so I think about things in terms of group policy objects. But I've worked in organizations before where a user said, I can't get to this shared drive, or I can't get to that thing. Can you just sort us out some access or whatever? And they'll raise a ticket. The operational guy will make the change in Active Directory. But unbeknownst to them, there's a knock-on security effect that they haven't necessarily considered, because not everybody's thinking about security all the time. And so we'll surface that up here. The platform itself is broken down into modules. We used to have our old platform was just like you just bought the one thing, but customers kept on feeding back to us that they were interested in specific use cases, or they wanted to try different things, different combinations of things. So we broke it out into modules, and that's what we're looking at the moment on screen. We try to overlay everything we can do to a kill chain. So we've got delivery on the left, and right the way through to exfiltration on the right-hand side. There's a couple of different ways that I think that you can use this data, and one's kind of straightforward and transactional. So our network infiltration attacks relates to our perimeter firewalls. So our perimeter firewalls aren't really stopping much from coming in. So, okay, let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at the data. What have we got to do to remediate that? Maybe we've got to load some signatures into our IPS module or something like that. And it's a very transactional, let's raise a change and fix that problem. If we consider the old trusty Windows endpoint, where we've got a score of 62%, as a security professional, we could say, okay, well, look, 62% is too low of a score. We're not happy with that. We need to raise our game a little bit here. And the business can either agree with you or not agree with you. But they've got data. They're making decisions now with data. And we can provide evidence of what it is we've managed to exploit in the environment. The best part about this, though, I think, really, is that once you've made that change, where you've run that initiative, when you get to the end of that project, you can rerun a baseline score against that endpoint and then compare the deltas. So you started off at 62%, we might have ended up at 95%. I'm not going to try and do the maths. And so for X amount of investment, you've got Y improvement in your security score. So it really does start to help you understand your return on investment. And it also helps guide where you need investment in your environment. And another really good use case, actually, we have with some customers is if they're talking to another vendor or they're going through another proof of concept, they'll use our product to A/B test. So if you're testing CrowdStrike and Defender ATP, you could A/B test it with our product to see which one's better out of the box or whatever. Below that, we've got, this is a new feature that came out a couple of weeks ago. So we've added some benchmarking, so in-region benchmarking and industry vertical benchmarking based on our own users. And one of the things we're able to do with that data is to say, this is what your peers in your region, or this is what your peers in your industry vertical, these are the things that they're concerned about, and it helps with idea generation. Because sometimes you put someone's talking about having being gifted a toolbox. If you don't know what to do with the tools, they're useless to you, right? And so if you've got all of this capability in front of you, if you don't know what to do with it, or you've got running out of ideas, it can be difficult to know where to get started. So this is the first place you can see that. One of the things that we do, which I think is very, very cool. So I'm a big fan of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, but one of the things with the framework is that I think it's quite difficult for organisations sometimes to operationalise that framework. And we were talking about standards earlier. I used to work with a guy who actually said compliance is one step away from negligence. You should start off with a good security posture, but that's another conversation. So one of the things that we're trying to do here in terms of operationalising the framework is to say, okay, well, let's run some simulations and see how well you're doing against the TTPs that you're worried about. And we red, amber, green that status. So this WMI TTP here, you can see the attacker actions that have happened. We can see whether the actions were blocked or not blocked. We can see whether we logged any data in our SIEM, and we can also see whether our SIEM alerted based on that. And we can dive into that and see a bit more information around the attack timeline. We can see the payload that we used, the terminal output, so it's pretty transparent like that. We can even see the log data, so this is putting back log data from our Splunk instance. So the endpoint's created the log data, it's sent back to Splunk, and then we made an API call to pull it back, and we do the same thing with the alert. So really, really useful information. There's another thing as well that I'll show you in the detection side, but I want to come into that later. If there's a TTP in here that you think, okay, actually we've done our threat profiling and we do want to know how our environment's done, but we've not run any simulations on that, we can click on the card and we could hit this Simulate Now button, and the platform's going to go and build us a template around that TTP or something that features that TTP, and we can simulate that in our environment. So it really is that easy to get going with it. Okay, so that's kind of the sort of dashboard and the output of the platform. We'll have a look at, we sort of segued into how to run stuff. So everything in the platform is done via templates. This is our emerging threats templates. This is stuff that's recommended by our Picus Labs team. So our labs team, red teamers, blue teamers, they're probably doing the same thing that a lot of you guys are doing. They'll subscribe to threat intelligence feeds. They'll do their own research, look at news events, that type of stuff. Once they find a threat, they'll reverse engineer it. The red team will reverse engineer it, capture the signatures, and they hand it over to the blue team, and the blue team build the detection content around it, and we surface it up there in these templates. To run a template, we just click on a template, hit Simulate Now, find an agent. Sometimes there's some extra config, and then we can just hit the Simulate Now button, and that's going to go away and build that template. So the cloud instance, the agent has checked in with the cloud to say, have I got any simulations to run, yes or no? You have. So then the playbook then the agent downloads the playbook and it starts to run the playbook, and we can come back and have a look at that in a second. Some customers want to build their own threats, and we can do that in a number of different ways. So we could just jump straight into our threat library and sort of point of clarification. A threat for us is every single line you see on the screen there is a threat. and then each threat has individual attacker actions underneath it. So if we wanted to build something around, let's say Black Cat, they always come up with really cool names for threats, or maybe not Black Cat, but anyway, so if we wanted to do Black Cat, we could do that, just hit the boxes and go through the same simulate now process if we wanted to, or we could say, okay, I know I'm particularly worried about APC 28, so we can build a search around particular threat groups. We can cut it up any which way you want to do it. And we can build these into our own custom templates that we can either run in an ad hoc manner, or we could schedule them to run regularly or continuously. And then the last way we can run threats is where you really start to leverage our threat database. So we could build a custom kill chain for a Windows machine, and this is where we're starting to leverage the individual exploits from our threat database in your own attack. So here we're just going to filter on initial access, and we can just start to drag them across, and we can start to build out the kill chain that way. And for anybody that does any offensive work in-house, have their own red teamers or pen testers, that type of stuff, we can create our own custom actions. So this is where you get to upload your own tools, your own scripts, anything that can be executed at the box, you can load up into this platform. It was an interesting use case came out the other day, actually. I was chatting to a guy, and he wanted to load up some verification scripts, because at the end of the day, we're just executing something at the command line and capturing the output. And so he wanted to, I think they were NIST scripts or something like that to verify the NIST config was in place. So he sort of saw it that way. Other pen testers I talked to talk about how they can automate the beginning part of their pen testing activity by leveraging this tool. Not all pen testing activity lends itself too well to automation, because you need that human ingenuity. But we can automate quite a lot of it. I'm moving through this at a rapid pace. It's like I'm doing an auction. Okay, so we've looked at the output, we've looked at how we run stuff. If we have a look at a simulation result now, I think our simulation is still running. So we'll pick on Black Byte ransomware. So this is a template that we run every day, and I use it for demoing purposes. A lot of people still want to talk to us about ransomware, which is, it's been around for a long, long time, and we've never really sort of solved the problem or come up with a good idea to solve. Well, there's many good ideas to solve the problem, but I don't think we've cracked it. And so I tend to talk about this, it's quite relevant for people. So the arc of this attack really is we're going to try and deliver something via email, then we're going to try and download some command and control, and then we're going to try and see what we're going to exploit on the endpoint itself. So we're pretty poor at blocking the emails in this environment. So we send two emails, one with an attachment and one with a malicious URL, and we can see that this URL has made it past our mail gateway. There's a bit of a biblical debate in the BAS community in terms of do you simulate or emulate, and what I mean by that is do you use benign payloads or do you use real payloads? We use real payloads because otherwise it's the equivalent of testing your kit against an ICAR file for AV, if people know what that is. But what we're able to do, because we use the real stuff, is provide real checksum information. So if you're using Mimecast or Proofpoint or something like that, you can build signature information using this checksum information very, very quickly. And we also provide what we call generic mitigation. So this is like technology-based best practices. So don't allow URLs in emails, or maybe use some sort of URL rewriting technology or something like that. Okay, so our environment, the emails got through, all of them got through. So let's check our perimeter firewall. We can see that actually we've got an RTF variant and we've got an XE variant has made it through. So let's have a look at the RTF file. So these two attacks are very similar in terms of we're trying to deliver a payload to something inside the customer's environment to see whether that control stops it. The first one was obviously the mail gateway. This is the firewall. So the attack details page looks exactly the same. We're able to start getting into logging information, so we can see actually in QRadar we've got some checkpoint logs that relate to this, this delivery. When it comes to prevention, this is where we start to really help our customers mitigate advice, right? So if you're running checkpoint firewalls and this was the result in your environment, this is the checkpoint signature you'd need to load into the IPS module to block this from happening. So we can very, very quickly say, if you're running these firewalls and you baseline your firewalls with our tool, this is the list of signatures today that you need to load into your IPS module to close the gap. And there's obviously the other host there. So really, really cool stuff. And that's how we can take that 30% score or whatever it was at the beginning, we can raise that up quite quickly. Where it gets more interesting for me on the endpoint side of things is when we start to talk about the logging stuff again. So there is always going to be things in your environment that you cannot prevent from happening, and they are, a lot of them are where attackers will use tools that are enabled in the OS They're available for them to use things like ipconfig or printing route tables, or in this case, we're gathering system languages via PowerShell. So this is a really benign PowerShell command. Do I want my SOC kicking into action when this goes off? Absolutely not. But taken in context of the whole attack, you can then infer that something malicious is going on, right? So this is the PowerShell command. So if the user got access to PowerShell, they can run it. This is the output, so it's not very bad. We looked at the logs a second ago, but if you weren't logging this and you wanted to build a correlation rule in your SIM, and you didn't know where to start with it, when we come to our detection content, we tell you the Windows policy you'd need to modify in order to generate the right log data. Then you can make that change, run the test again. Okay, well now we've got logs. If you're running Splunk or one of these other vendors up here, we can give you SIM-specific rule logic. Or if you're running another SIM, it's pretty easy to translate most rules these days from a Sigma rule. So you could take this rule and now say, okay, build the search in your SIM, and we can now detect this behavior. So that sounds really dry, and it's only really interesting to people like me that kind of have battled with getting this stuff into SIMs for many years. But where it's really useful for customers, I think, and this is where Baz, I think, does a good job of translating the techie stuff into the non-techie stuff, is that when I used to work for a SIM vendor, I worked for service providers, no one wanted to talk to me about logs. It was a very sad time for me. All they wanted to talk to me about was attacks. They were, oh, we're worried about this ransomware, we're worried about this thing. So now all of a sudden I can now say, okay, well, what attacks are you worried about? I'll simulate them, and then I can get the data out of the tool, and I can go and do my logging stuff, and we can make sure that your SIM is going to detect the things that you want it to detect. The knock-on effect is that you reduce false positives in your SOC. We all know that SOCs are really, really scarcely resourced. It's difficult to get hold of people. And to be honest with you, it's a tough job, right? You're chasing down false positives all day. People are moaning at you. People are on your back all the time. So anything you can do to relieve the pressure from that, I think, is a really good thing. And that is exactly what we can do here. And we can validate it works exactly the same way that you want it to work. So the last thing before I hand over to my partner in crime is just on this mitigation point. So if we just jump back across to checkpoint, I just want to just leave you with this. So this is our checkpoint file in this environment. We've delivered 325 payloads to this checkpoint firewall. It's blocked 165. It's not blocked 160. These are all of the action names, all of the payloads that have not been blocked. But if we jump across the signatures now, if we load these 154 signatures into our checkpoint firewall, that will take that score from 50 to as close to 100% as Checkpoint can be with the signatures they have in the database. And that's like a really easy, meaningful thing you can do. So you can run these templates once a week, or you can run them continuously or once a month, and you can be sure that your controls are reacting in the way that you expect them to react. So I'll leave it with that and hand over to Dan.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, you've only...
that deserves very good. So I work with Simon and Jack. We've got the back of the room. If you have any questions afterwards, obviously we'll be here all day. I just want to add just a little bit. Just go back one. Just start. That's it. Yeah. So I just want to add a little bit more kind of context as to around where we're going with the platform. Okay. So we've already seen that the platform, or it's not really a platform at the moment. We've got sort of a number of point solutions in place, and we want to kind of move to a platform vision. And you can see that we've got this really powerful tool that's able to help customers drive that continuous validation against their security investments that we've seen across protection and prevention tools. And then to Tao's point, I really like what she was saying around the fact that we don't want to just be another tool that gives you huge amounts of visibility and loads of data. We also provide that remediation loop that Simon showed you there, where we can tie back into your security investments and be very prescriptive on how you sort of move forward and get that continuous improvement. So it's safe to say that we're really, really good at optimizing your security controls today. But the founders of Picus, and I'm really in agreement with this, that to really improve your security posture, we've got to move from this optimization point and start to build in more of a risk prioritization perspective to really trying to sort of add that additional amount of value. And to help you sort of understand that and why we're going that route, I want to talk a bit about what we've seen in the industry in the last few years and a couple of examples, and then we'll talk a bit about what we're doing and why we're moving that way. So thanks, Simon. So we all know that obviously XDR has been around for a couple of years, and Gartner saw that the XDR market was a great way of pulling together a load of siloed cybersecurity solutions into one unified platform to really help you speed up that time to detection and response. And there's lots of examples out there, but the CrowdStrike Falcon platform was a pretty successful one based on the fact that it was able to stop, a raft of breaches by consolidating multiple cloud security solutions into one unified platform. And, financially, obviously, they had a huge success last year with nearly sort of 50% growth on their ARR to 2.5 billion. So thanks, Simon. And then the second example, before we move on to our area, is cloud consolidation. Now, we know there's a whole raft of tools out there that are designed to help organizations speed up the process of migrating workloads to the cloud in a more secure and effective way. Now, Gartner coined the phrase CWPP, Cloud Workloads Protection Platform, as a way of pulling together those unique protection requirements into one centralized platform. And a first move and a really successful example of this would be Wiz. I'm not sure if anyone in the room is using it, but obviously it's a great platform that enables you to be able to, for whatever size enterprise you are, to be able to identify and remove those critical misconfigurations that we were talking about earlier in the presentation, and be able to do that across multi-cloud environments, whether that's AWS, GCP, or Azure. And again, massive sort of financial successes, going from $1 million to 100 million ARR last year, one of the fastest growing B2B companies. So what can we do in our area? So thanks, Simon. So we're firmly sitting within the cyber risk management side of things. And it's safe to say that this is very much kind of a siloed marketplace. It's covering exposure activities ranging from vulnerability scanning to pen testing, as we've talked about. But I think really the challenge is, as I said at the start, is that we don't really have that holistic view to help organisations manage their overall cyber risk. And we think this sort of point solutions approach in our marketplace is being driven a lot by the fact you've got lots of different business personas that all have different requirements, whether you're a business leader trying to get deeper insight into your risk to help you make more informed business decisions, right the way through to the guys, security engineers that are really trying to validate their own work and really remove those repetitive and mundane activities. So we think it's that kind of level of complexity that's really amplified the trend to go to this, what we see now, very much sort of fragmented market in our space, which is the cyber risk management space. Obviously, Picus, along with a load of other vendors out there, we're all kind of addressing, a lot of the same problems with slightly different approaches. Thanks, Simon. So let's bring on the next umbrella term that Gartner's coined, CTEM, Continuous Threat Exposure Management. Now, what is it? Now, this program is essentially, a way to help organisations, better understand, orchestrate, and manage their cyber risk. And it's done by bringing in more context into view. So, governance, risk, and compliance, threat detection and response, and security optimization, which is kind of where we've been sitting up until today. And Gartner is suggesting that those organisations that validate their security investments via a CTEM program are going to experience, I think it's 2/3 less breaches. So essentially, we've got the when we look at actually consolidating this fragmented market that we've got today into one centralised market, into an exposure management market, we've got $21 billion addressable market. Picus is really well placed in this to be able to build out a CTEM platform. And we're seeing Gartner's suggesting that a large proportion of organisations are going to be moving to that approach. And we've just got one more slide. So, of course, we'd be kind of crazy not to move into the CTEM space. We're very well positioned. Gartner's suggesting it's the way to go. And we already have kind of 3 key established products, part of what Simon's been demonstrating for you today with breach attack simulation, automated pen testing, and detection engineering. So last month we announced 2 more products to the platform, one being our cyber asset attack surface management offering. And in a nutshell, this is going to give customers the ability to get that real-time information across their internal networks to quickly identify the non-compliant and at-risk assets, applications, and users. And then cloud posture management is another area that we've just launched the first iteration, supported on AWS, then the multi-cloud vendors coming shortly after, to again help customers quickly identify the misconfigurations in cloud workloads and be able to simulate those privilege escalation scenarios, so that essentially the security teams are going to be able to understand the impact of an attack in those environments, and will give you that actionable data to help mitigate those risks. So in final summary, because I know we're being rushed to finish, essentially what we've got here is this consolidated platform that's pulling together information about threats and vulnerabilities together, so getting that additional context that we don't have today, and being able to turn the actionable data from security language to business language, just being able to help customers really help them manage their security posture in a more risk-based fashion. And that's it.